My name is Christopher Chen, and I'm a freshman at NYU Stern. I'll be presenting my policy, which consists of 3 parts. 1, to regulate fracking. 2, to make money for businesses and the newer government. And 3, to fund the public transportation in poor areas. So I'll start with the science of climate change, specifically CO2, policy, and then go on to the economic effects and then the constraints of the policy. As you can see, as we start in the Arctic, the ice melting, 3/4 the size of the long-term average. More ice melting in Greenland, ice melting, glaciers. So along with the sea level rise, we can see there's probably correlation between melting ice and global temperature. As you can see, the global temperature has increased dramatically in the last 20 years. 17 warmest years have all occurred within the last 20 years. And even if we measure the average over across 100 years, the one before was only a couple of years, you can see it's also still increasing in the last 20 years. That dramatic increase is alarming. So we see the influence of humans. Without humans, the models here, you see the blue curves, they're not really going up. But because of humans, on a global scale, temperature is going up. So in terms of what humans are doing, the anthropogenic forcings, CO2 is one of the biggest things that we are contributing. A lot of it from fossil fuels. So we look at fossil fuels and atmospheric CO2, see a correlation between what we burn, the amount of CO2, here's what they measured, and then even from ice core data, you see CO2 is going up. Now, in terms of ice core data, this is just showing that there's more carbon being released. And one way of measuring that, see that ratio of carbon 12 to carbon 13. The more carbon 12 there is, the more CO2 is being released, because C12 was used by plants a while back. It's more efficiently used in cell photosynthesis and stuff like that. So more CO2, alright, especially in the last 100 years, contribute that to the Industrial Revolution. And even looking at all the time before, CO2 is increasing more recently. And there seems to be a pretty strong correlation between CO2 and temperature. We look at all the years, they go up and down with each other. So this correlation does not necessarily imply that CO2 is the only reason global temperatures are increasing. It obviously isn't. But if we cease to keep increasing CO2, there may be a chance that global warming slows. And we see this molecular level demonstration of CO2 contributing to infrared radiation, which makes global warmer. Non-diatomic molecules. Okay. So when we look at models, all the lines go up. Even if we have no more pollution now, the models are still going up. So that means no matter what we do, we can't really stop global warming, but we can at least slow it down. That's the main goal for now. So that's why we have to focus on carbon dioxide. Anthropogenic forcing is something we can control. And CO2 doesn't only just negatively affect the atmosphere, make everything warm, it also makes the oceans more acidic with this reaction of bicarbonate. So this is sort of a tragedy of the global commons. What we do here affects what happens on the other side of the globe. And it's not necessarily only one person's fault. It's many, many unintentional consequences. So the social cost of carbon, SEC, is just one way of measuring the estimated losses of every ton of carbon produced. This is something government uses. Took this right off the White House website, or just a proposal they were using in the White House. So I used the lowest estimate of losses per ton and use that for an elementary type of calculation. And because coal plants release around twice the amount of carbon dioxide as natural gas plants, we can see, I use 10 as a number, and you save roughly around 17.5 million at least if you switch from a coal plant to a natural gas plant. So these are just ideas in favor of natural gas, but here comes the policy. Policy revolves around hydraulic fracturing. Part 1, regulating fracking, because there are malpractices. It's controversial. We don't know what's happening. People don't really necessarily care as much about the environment when they're trying to make profits. We have that assumption in economics that all markets try to maximize profits. So here's Irvin Schenkler talking about controversy.
So there's a different set of competing interests. The economic interests of some local communities may be outweighing the environmental risks and costs associated with it. This creates loopholes and sometimes opportunities for companies to sort of skirt best practices when it's not absolutely mandated.
So he talks about the loophole, and specifically for fracking, it's called the Halliburton loophole from the Bush administration. Kind of allowed fracking companies to do what they wanted, and as a result, they didn't really have to adhere to drinking water regulations, and that's a big concern for many people who are familiar and not that familiar with hydraulic fracturing. So the unknown aspect is one thing that puts people against it. It's one of the easiest ways to go for fracking. Okay, so on the idea of taxing them, because the decision is stalled right now in court, Cuomo has neither allowed nor prohibited fracking right now. He hasn't made a decision yet at the highest level legislature. There's no legislative ruling yet. It's a good idea to tax them, to regulate them, and to fine them if they don't adhere to this type of stuff. And this helps with competition, also between not only between the fracking companies, but all types of energy industries. But here is distinguished economic historian Richard Silla, and he will talk about the idea of taxing.
But, we want to make sure the costs are right so the proper decisions are made, and I think by putting carbon taxes on the production of this stuff, we're actually raising the price so the companies don't overinvest in doing this, but give us just the right amount. The best sort of pollution to have is not no pollution at all, but the right amount of pollution so that we get the benefits of whatever it is that creates the pollution while taking account of the true cost of it.
So, from an economics point of view, he was talking about the idea of pollution being perhaps a good thing for competition, and it sort of implies a perfectly competitive market. You have market clearance, supply and demand. If they make natural gas go up, people won't overinvest in this type of thing. There won't be that type of bubble. The problem with Dakota, some people think it's another gold rush, where there are little problems there in the fracking industry. If you tax them and stuff, people won't keep thinking, oh, it has unlimited types of bounties and stuff. So he also, as a historian point of view, he talked about the U.S. historical charters for companies, and he mentioned how companies in Massachusetts sometimes would have to allocate 10% of the capital to agricultural and manufacturing industries. Yale, in Connecticut, they had to donate to financial institutions, and even now, Citibank, they have city bikes. You have that alliance between government and businesses. So this hasn't been done before, and Richard Silla even mentioned to me the Erie Canal in New York. It was something that opened up a lot of opportunities, for business and stuff like that. So if you open up a fracturing site and a hydraulic fracking site in New York State, you never know what's going to happen. So in terms of economic effects, here is environmental economist and statistician Roy Radner talking about carbon-free technology.
Because if you have these fields and wells that are driven and pipelines that carry them, that's an investment. And once you make that investment, you have a sunk cost. And free technologies relatively more expensive.
So the same idea, making carbon-free technology more expensive. Now they have an incentive to compete to lower prices of carbon-free technology, nuclear energy, solar energy. And so the same thing, market clearance. We have this type of natural competition in a more perfect competitive environment. Now they have to fulfill supply and demand type of thing. The more natural gas there is, the less people are going to go for carbon-free technology. And if anything, the most important thing, it buys us time to get an actual, more inexpensive type of carbon-free technology. That's our future true goal. So he also talks about fossil fuel dependence right now. So this brings up another reason why we should try going for natural gas, because it's so difficult to leave this fossil fuel dependence. It takes time and a lot of money to just go for that. This is him talking again.
Fossil fuels account for about 80% of our energy. So, that's going to be an enormous job, very expensive, to move quickly enough to make a significant difference.
So that's also one reason why hydraulic fracturing is a good idea for now. Before this type of evolution of technology comes, we should try to buy ourselves time and lower foreign dependence on oil. Okay, so as of now, New York city citizens take a lot of benefits from Pennsylvania fracking companies. Okay, we have lower gasoline, 50% less energy costs, and despite this, a lot of people still are opposed to fracking. So we have this thing against this regulation. You don't have regulation, so it seems dangerous, it's unknown. So that's one of the biggest concerns. So that's why we need regulation. As you can see, it goes through drinking water, so of course people are concerned. But in terms of the idea of allocating these funds, there are many economic effects that will happen when you put this into the public transportation sector. All right, so you have this positive multiplier from investing $1, and then you get back $4, saving $10,000 a year, 4,400 miles of driving. These things, besides the scientific stuff, this is good for a lot of households. Saves money. So, Natural Resource Defense Council came up with 5 steps to do this. This policy, in addition to like the carbon tax thing, assuming that's coming soon, we'll get one, hit that with carbon, global warming pollution. Then we have green energy. Well, at the least, it's cleaner than coal, which is our main fossil fuel. So that is probably going in a better direction. 3, smarter cars. Well, public transportation, no cars at all, like saving a lot of driving. Buildings, if we have new public transportation infrastructure, we're assuming that this infrastructure may be more efficient. Along with natural gas, heating, that type of stuff, probably more efficient. Transportation in communities and employment for fracking, and then transportation networks, public transportation. We don't need to talk about that much. So this is, again, recap, with like, especially bringing into the dependence of foreign oil. That's important. And that's a big benefit. And Richard Silla again talked about that, how much money we can save.
And so, one of the reasons why energy independence would be a good thing for the United States is that we might be able to save ourselves a lot of money in patrolling the seas of the world just to keep the oil flowing from the Middle East. And so I think this is an argument sort of in favor of fracking, provided it can be done safely. It reduces our dependence on Middle Eastern oil, which actually costs us a lot more than we think it does if we add some of the defense budget into the actual cost of the oil.
So he brings up the point of how much money we have to spend to maintain that dependence on foreign oil. This Middle Eastern defense budget, that's something that we could nearly eliminate with hydraulic fracturing for bring production back to the U.S. That's all stuff. So this talks about how public transportation is already trying to get funding from Congress and with the MAP 21 Act. So this is not that radical, and we have this historical support. And so we also have competition, but that also helps the idea of fracking, you know, a more balanced type of market. And then you have the dangers of fracking, but most of these problems can be solved by regulation. And we see that may require a lot of water, but if you recycle them, that's a better way. So a lot of these problems can be solved by regulating. So we recap: 1, you regulate them, right? 2, just make money. 3, put it into public transportation. And all these effects, you will open up opportunity for U.S. to become one of the largest exporters of oil past Saudi Arabia. And these are all benefits that outweigh the costs. So I thank you very much for your time.